Gress.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for this evening, Wednesday, December 13th. Ms. Dow, could you call the roll, please?
Chair Suma,
Present.
Vice Chair Chang,
Here.
Commissioner Aiken,
Here.
Commissioner Heckman,
Here.
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Now is the time when we open it up for the public who would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda to make a comment. Do we have any speakers, Ms. Dow?
No request to speak.
Okay, we will move on then to agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
We have no changes, additions, or deletions.
Excellent. So it's now time for city official reports, please.
Good evening, Amy French, Chief Planning Official. Just a quick overview. It is the end of the year for the Planning and Transportation Commission. Congratulations, our last meeting of 2023. And it's been a busy year. So thank you for your work and for representing Planning Commission at Council, those of you who have. Do we have a speaker? Okay. Target dates coming up. So we have January 17th that's been on the books as a special meeting rather than the January 10th. And we have the 31st, it's a regular meeting. We have a special meeting of February 12th, which we are holding on to as a date as a special meeting with the council. We'll let you know if things change there. And so we just have a few items coming up that we know of, and there will be more to come. As far as council meetings, we did have a meeting on Monday with the Ellsworth item, and thanks to Commissioner Liu for showing up as a representative for that. And then we have a couple more. We have one more meeting, which is next Monday. Yeah, can't think if there's another item going at council. And we'll be back in the new year with more chances to represent. And I think we have, do we have Raphael online? Okay, that's concluding my report.
Thank you for that. Mr. Rios, do you have something for us?
Hi, yes, just some minor updates. Raphael Rios of the Office of Transportation, Senior Engineer. Just a couple minor things. The Charleston-Rascadero Corridor project is, as you may know, is still ongoing. We're expecting some of the hardware that's long awaited to come in and hopefully proceed with the project, primarily speaking of the intersection at Wilkie Way. So we're hoping we can move forward with that transition because it's some of the new poles have not been activated yet. So hopefully within the next month or so, we'll get that moving. And then the only other update I have is not really an update, but I know our transportation staff gave some information to this committee or to the commission during the last meeting regarding the El Camino Real repaving and bikeways project. Just wanted to update you that we're still waiting for a response from Caltrans, a formal response from them. We haven't received it yet, but their deadline is supposed to be this week. So other than that, no other updates.
Thank you. Commissioner Aiken?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rios, I just wanted to follow up with you on the Lincoln Middlefield intersection. So we had another accident there about 3 weeks ago, and I sent you a note asking for an update, but didn't hear back. So what can you tell us about what's new there?
Okay, so we did I'll have to look into that. I'm not aware of the incident 3 weeks ago. So I'll look into that. What we have as staff have done, we increased the sight lines on all four corners by adding some parking restrictions, increasing the red curves on each of the four corners to and then we also added additional pavement markings and kind of highlighting the yellow center line and also adding school zone markings And we also added the 20-mile-an-hour special school zone speed limit signs, also like right in the immediate area of the intersection. So those were the immediate improvements that we identified and have completed installation of them. I can't speak to the recent incident at this time, though. I'll try to find out more about it.
Okay, thank you. Just as you already know, there's a lot of interest in the neighborhood in turn restrictions. So people will be looking for an update on how that's being considered.
Okay, and I'll apologize. I'll look for your email and respond and get back to you also.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Chang?
Hi, Mr. Rios. I'm hoping that, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder to please send us the collision report that Payback also receives.
Yes, okay. Oh, I apologize. I meant to send that today. So I did try to dig it up. We actually, we thought we was the October data, we thought we had it and was going to be shared with the payback committee. So I know our staff reached out late yesterday to the PD to follow up, to see if we had the October data. The November data is going to come in early January, but the October data is going to, and as soon as I get that, I'll share that along with the September data. But okay.
Yeah, great. It'd be great if we could see September too, because I think that was when we first heard about it, but still haven't seen it. So thank you so much.
Okay. I was planning to send both the September and October together as soon as we get them, but I can send a September ahead of that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rios. I'm not seeing any other. Commissioner Heckman?
It's not really a city official report issue, but Commissioner Reckdahl is not here tonight because earlier this week, his mother passed away in Minnesota. May her memory be a blessing. And as we proceed through our agenda tonight, our thoughts are with Keith and his family.
Thank you for that. I am not seeing any other lights, so we will go to the next item, which is our action item number 2. But before we do that, Commissioner Aiken will need to recuse. So Commissioner Aiken.
That's right. I'll be recusing myself from the 949 Scott Street item because I live less than 500 feet away from the project. So we'll see you all when it is done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we can go down the line, starting with Commissioner Templeton, if there are any disclosures.
I have no disclosures.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
Okay, then we are all set to open public hearing for 949 Scott Street, which is a request for Planning and Transportation Commission hearing following the proposed director's decision approving a variance application to allow a new single-story, single-family home with basement and encroachments and variances. So with that, we will move to Ms. French for the staff report.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Garrett Sauls, who you've met before. He is remotely attending and has a presentation. Take it away, Garrett.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the introduction. Chief Planning Official Amy French. As you all have mentioned, this is an application for a variance for 949 Scott Street. As you can see on the screen, I've highlighted where the property is in relationship to the Scott Park. So it's a little bit easier to kind of understand roughly where we're talking about, but it is at the corner of Scott Street, Addison, and you can see Waverly and Bryant Street are also within the frame here. So it is fairly close to the downtown area, but it is located within the South of Forest Area Phase 1 Coordinated Area Plan districts and comprehensive planned areas. The proposed application will seek to replace an existing one-story home that exists on a 1,500 square foot parcel. The proposal will have a new one-story home with a basement. As a part of the application, it will result in the removal of one street tree in order to accommodate one existing street tree in order to accommodate the proposed driveway leading to the garage for this structure. Though that street tree removal will require the replacement of 2 street trees, one of which will be placed to the left-hand side of the street tree that you see over here. If the image had expanded, you would see that there's a large strip of vacant dirt where there would be one street tree placed within that area, and then another will be replaced within a half mile of this property. So will be placed within the SOPA Phase 1 area as well as the downtown area, in an area where there currently doesn't have any street tree canopy. The project also includes variance requests for front, side, and rear yard setback encroachments for the primary home in the basement, a below-grade patio encroachment into the side and rear yard setback, and a reduction in the number of required parking stalls, where a new single-family home would otherwise be required to have 2 parking spaces, one covered and one uncovered, and both beyond the front yard setback. This application instead proposes only 1 covered parking space where currently there are none on the site. In this image you can see here, this image was provided to us to staff by the applicant when they submitted their application, and this identifies the boundaries of the existing parcel and how the current standard setbacks would be applying to the property based on the R2 zoning district. As you can see from the front yard and the rear yard, there's a 20-foot front yard and rear yard setback, and there's a standard 6-foot side setback on both sides. And the square that you see my cursor moving around now would result in the standard developable area of the parcel, which you can see is about 180 square feet. On this screen, you can see on the left-hand side, the existing building, which is just a 1-story structure. As I mentioned before, there is no existing covered parking on site or no parking provided on site whatsoever. And on the right-hand side of the image, you can see that you can see the proposal, the first floor, where you do see that 1-car garage, the entrance off of Scott Street, the living room in the back, and you can see the entrance to the below-grade stairwell, as well as the staircase downward to the basement. Here on the screen, you can see the proposed basement where they have their family room and living room, as well as the bedroom and the kitchen area for this proposal. On this screen, you can see the proposed elevations that are included in the plan set. You can see this is the front elevation here, again, with that doorway off of Scott Street and the driveway indicated here leading up to the 1-car garage. This is the side elevation from the left side of the property looking inward towards the site. Here are some section images which show kind of cut-throughs through the building, showing the garage, living area space, and bedroom and family room space down below as a side section. And then here you have a front section, which again kind of shows those same areas. We did receive a fair number of public comments on this application, and those public comments related to the number of variances that were requested, the aesthetic design of the proposed building, whether the structure will be used as a home or as an extension of the neighbor's house, who the neighbors currently own this property, impacts to the existing street trees, concerns related to impacts to the existing street trees, concerns to the impacts of parking within the area, as well as the quality of life during construction. And lastly, consistency with the general plan, as well as Senate Bill 330. And this last item loops back really to item number 3, which asks, or the public comments that we were receiving asks the question of whether the structure is being replaced, the existing structure is being replaced with something that still provides the capacity for a new single-family home or someone to live there. Staff's recommendation would be to approve the proposed project based on the included findings and conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant is also here and has a presentation that they will be able to share.
Okay, thank you for that very much. And I guess we go next to the applicant to make a presentation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Rhodes. I'm one of the principal architects at Young and Borlick Architects, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and present for you all. Also with me is Andrew Young, one of our founding principals. So just in case there's any questions, he has unique insight for. Looking back at the timing on this project, it was almost exactly a year ago that we submitted for this project, December 16th, 2022. We've done 3 rounds of revisions since then as we've interacted with all the different departments, considering neighbor concerns, everything that was received during that time. The approval letter was in October 25th. But now there's the new concerns, which have recently arose with the appeal filed. So that gives us a chance to revisit all those considerations that went into the project, review the grounds that the planning staff based their recommendations for, listen and address and hopefully allay any of those remaining concerns. And so we can continue moving forward. The staff report, as always, is always very detailed and comprehensive. It covers all the parts of the project, but I'll just highlight a few points that I think we can emphasize in our time here today. Starting with our project goals, it's an interesting property, certainly unique in its size. Our task was to design a modern single-family home, something up to current standards and codes, something safer, more energy efficient, and with more living space and off-street parking. So starting with the neighborhood, as we discussed, it's a little lot in the R2 area. Oh. What a time to crash. I apologize. No, I just have to reopen. I'm pretty sure.
Looks like you're having a technical problem.
I am. I'm sorry about that.
We all
If it's
do.
helpful, I can also share the applicant's presentation.
That would work. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think I can describe everything adequately.
You can just let Mr. Sauls know when to advance.
Yeah, can we go to number 3? That was just our chance to zoom in and understand the lot and the property. Skipping ahead to there we go. It's unique in its size and location. If we go to the next one, we've seen this graphic before. So just to emphasize, it's only 180 square feet. That would be legally or conforming, I should say. That's about a 0.12 floor area ratio if we were to stick just to that. That'd be similar to a comparable 6,000 square foot lot, 50 by 120 that you might see elsewhere all over Palo Alto. 6,000 square foot lot with the 0.12 floor area ratio, we're looking at about a 720 square foot house, which leaves about 500 square feet for living area. Certainly not what would be considered usable for in a current context. Next one. So just looking at the existing property, that's the existing house and floor plan. You can see we've checked the distances. The setbacks are currently 3 feet on the sides. It's as close as 2'10" on the right-hand side, and close as about 4 feet at the front, at the rear. We're 17'10" to the residence on the right-hand side, 353 Addison, and we're almost 12 feet to the residence next door at 935 Scott Street. Moving to the next one. So this one is our proposed first floor plan with the site. The setbacks were increased by a foot, taking them to 4 feet on the sides and the rear. We've maintained the same setback at the front for consistency there. We have the rear stairwell for the basement access for natural light and improving the quality of space down there with the little sunken patio. That reduces the upper floor footprint and actually increases distances from some of those neighbors as well. With our design, we've actually increased the total living space of the house by 150 square feet, and we've done that by providing the off-street covered parking space. The one street tree that was removed, that was been discussed at length. We had a meeting with Urban Forestry Division August 2nd. The condition to remove that one tree to provide the one-car driveway is 2 replacement box trees. And just to clarifying for those that might be interested, those are trees that are paid for by our owners. They need to purchase and take care of installing those 2 trees. That wasn't something we offered to sweeten the deal. That was just Urban Forestry telling us that's what we had to do to satisfy the replacement for that one tree we're taking out. Not paid for by the city. The next slide shows our basement plan in relation to the site. We have the stairwell in the back with lots of natural light to bring in, the stairwell from the front, interior stair. There's a lot of glazing on that corner, which will bring light downstairs too. Sometimes there's the concern that basements are not going to be desirable or livable. I would say about 90% of the projects, new homes we're doing in Palo Alto are including a basement. They're all very light and bright. They're all very livable. They often include some sort of bedroom suite down there, guest suite, nanny suite, anything along those lines. Sometimes the ADUs are in the basement. All of them are done nicely. They're not the commonly stereotypical dark and undesirable places anymore. So as far as the overall house, we feel it's a great design. With all the consideration we've done, we feel it's a very viable home. It's a very livable home. We're excited for it. Given the constraints of the property, the size, we feel it's one of the best solutions we've arrived at for tonight. There were some neighbor concerns, which I can just address. In our original submittal, we had 2-car garage proposed, so that was more dominant on the front. The requirement was for a 2-car garage, so we started with that, thinking that was, a need. We were not quite able to achieve a full 2-car garage. We were only 18 by 20 and hoping we were maybe close enough. Transportation Division comment was it was not big enough. Neighbor concerns was that there was too much garage. So finding in the middle, we've just stuck with the 1-car garage. It's a little bit oversized, but we feel that's necessary. This is such a small property. There's no side yard space. There's no areas you might keep a shed. There's no even covered patios where you might store additional stuff. So all those things that might go in those locations need to go somewhere inside, like the side garage. Going to the 1-car garage, let's reduce the driveway width, which I think was also a concern. It only removes the removal of the one tree instead of both. We looked at trying to fit the driveway between the trees with Urban Forestry. That was a question that they had. There's only 14 feet of space from tree to tree. Urban Forestry and Public Works, they ask typically for 10 feet, for driveways to be 10 feet from a street tree. There's no way we would achieve that at all. So there's a concern of whether we need a garage at all. Parking on that block is challenging. It's narrow, it's short. There's the park at the end. There's a rehabilitation medical facility around the corner. So street parking is usually in competition. Not always, but there are times when it's full. The 2 neighbor letters also echoed the concern about the loss of parking. I think in our case, we aren't losing 2 parking spaces. At most, we're losing 1. The curb cut for our driveway will be right next to the curb cut and rear parking that 935 Addison uses. So by grouping those 2 together, we're minimizing the amount of curb lost. So I would say 1 spot at most would be lost, but we're also gaining 1 back by allowing us to have the off-street parking. Certainly a parking is an amenity we just need in current homes. I know we'd love to all give up our cars and walk everywhere, but various scenarios, things that you just need in a single family home. You come home with groceries, you can't find parking in front of your house, so you have to park around the corner and lug your groceries around the corner. Is it bad weather? You have to do that in inclement weather. If you have an electric vehicle, how do you charge your vehicle? You run an extension cord across the sidewalk, maybe. So there are reasons and purposes for having off-street parking. There was concerns about our first proposal as well, that it was not out of curb appeal. It looked too much like a garage. So shrinking it down gave us an opportunity to create a little bit more pedestrian feel to it. The entrance was always planned to be around on the side, but having the front door into the garage, it just aids on the appearance from the street and making it feel a little more pedestrian friendly. It gave us a chance to add the articulation, make it a better looking design. There's concerns about the house being historic or old. It may be charming, but there was a historic investigation report by Page and Turnbull. They found it to be ineligible for a historic registry. And also to clarify, Page and Turnbull is the city resource that the city hires for these reports. This isn't a report that we engage to privately to maybe go in our favor. This is the city's firm. Looking at our other slides here, the previous slide was the existing front elevation. You can see the one street tree we'll be removing. The next slide is the proposed. We've ghosted the trees, so we actually get a chance to see the architecture beyond for this presentation. You can see that the driveway will be minimized into the right-hand side, closer to the other driveway. And the last slide is just our streetscape elevation as we look at the context of this structure compared to the neighbors. This will not be a view we would ever see because of all the landscaping and trees and such, but it gives a context of size and scale. I think that's the main points I wanted to drill on. We're obviously ready for any questions or any additional things we can provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I was wondering if my colleagues have any clarifying questions before we go to the public. Commissioner Heckman?
Just a quick question for staff. The staff report didn't mention ARB. I take it that this project didn't require any review by ARB?
That's correct. This application, if it was submitted, if it was approved and then submitted to the city, it would simply go through a building permit process, given that it's a one-story home.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chang?
Quick clarifying question about the tree in the rear that is not on this property. But if I look at A1.1, like that drawing, there's a circle that shows 300, I think it's a 300-foot radius. So what is required by the tree ordinance in terms of basements and trees?
Based on the diameter, it's 10 times the diameter for the tree protection radius. In this case, the arborist looked at that in terms of impact from the excavation. We would be using the back property line fence would essentially be our tree protection fence in terms of any impact on the route.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last sentence of what you said.
The rear fence of the property line would essentially be our tree protection fence. Usually there's a tree protection fence that outlines that area to various degrees based on
Okay,
recommendations.
but I guess my question is, why is there a 300-foot radius and that circle goes into the basement?
Yeah, so the city has established standards for where tree protection measures should be put in place. And ideally, what is intended is to try to provide as much buffer around where there might possibly be any potential roots. At this great of a distance, there would not be, kind of trying to think of the right term for it, but there would not be structural roots kind of to this great extent all the way out, extending towards the basement, where if they were to be, modified cut, removed, that they would somehow affect the tree to an extent that it would fail.
Okay, so the city arborist has made that evaluation then, correct?
They do look at that as a part of the application submittal. And this is, to some degree, it's a technical requirement, as Mr. Rose was talking about, where they look at the diameter of the trunk, and then they've established a formula that says 10 times that diameter, you need to provide a tree protection fence around it. And if this were, for example, if you see my cursor on the screen, if this tree were placed right here, right, such that the base of the roots, the more, structural roots to the tree itself were much, much, much closer, then there may be a scenario where any sort of below grade construction would otherwise possibly cut into those structural roots. But at this greater extent back out of here, there are lesser, these are kind of almost, I would say, more like fingerlings or tendrils to a degree at that extent, as far away as it is from the main base of the tree, that you're not going to have structural roots that, if they are cut, are going to cause this tree here to fail, collapse, or die.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess the ordinance, in terms of is there some percentage of roots that can be removed? I mean, I think
25%
it's 25%, right?
is the rule of thumb that arborists have had in the past. I believe that the new tree technical manual has tried to reduce that slightly, but 25% has been a general rule of thumb that I've heard from urban forestry and arborists when I've had conversations with them. And this wouldn't have anywhere near that kind of an impact on this root zone.
The
okay,
T sheets in our set also have the arborist report that we enlisted for the review, and they touch upon the impacts on the tree as well.
Okay. My other question is around SB 330 SB 330 only requires preservation of number of units, right? Reduction in number of bedrooms is not a concern. Is that correct? I just want to verify before.
In terms of the number of bedrooms, I will defer to Mr. Yang, but in general, my understanding is that the number of units is what is the threshold change. And so whether it's designed as a pyramid house or whether it's designed as a more standard type of expected single family development, so long as there are residential units being provided, in this case, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, then there is not necessarily a loss of housing.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, that's seen no others. I think we will go to the public. Ms. Dow, do we have speakers in the room or online?
I have no speaker cards or raised hands.
Seeing that we have, oh. So- Thank you. If you haven't filled out a speaker card, you just need to do so, and then, or you could do it after you speak too.
All right, I apologize. This is my first time coming to one of these.
That's quite all right. We're
And
happy
I
to
was
see
late
you.
running in, so thank you, commissioners, for hearing me this evening. So my name is Andrew Martin, and I live across the street from the proposed development project. And I am one of the neighbors that did write into Mr. Garrett prior to.
Please speak right into the
Oh,
microphone.
sorry, excuse me, prior to, or as this process was going on. So I wanted to provide a little perspective from me. And I also, I just received a text from the neighbors next door that are also directly across the street from the proposed development. Tim O'Leary and his wife, he was working late and unable to make it here, but authorized me to speak on his behalf because we've discussed the issue. So I'm trying to think where to begin. Prior to 15 years ago, just for a little perspective, this stretch of Scott Street was 3 homes. So there was 935, 943, and 949. An owner bought 943, the house in the middle, and halfway through, well, it was a spec development, and halfway through development, an owner purchased it. And then the neighbor at 935 elected to sell The person who had purchased 943 then purchased the adjacent home 935 and submitted to the city to combine the two into a lot. I haven't verified this, but from what I heard, it made it by like 1 or 2 square feet. So it's a 10,000 square foot lot in Palo Alto. And in that process, we took 2 single family homes and converted them into one very large single family home. That very large single family home only has a 1-car garage, which in all honesty, almost every house in the area only has a 1-car garage. And I can tell you that I'm not aware of any neighbor that actually parks a vehicle in their garage. So what we're talking about here is another housing unit that the prior owner, Elizabeth, lived there for 15 years before she moved to Channing House. It was a perfect home for a senior to do an exchange into, reset her tax year, and be able to live in close proximity to downtown and have a wonderful, vibrant life with neighbors. The reason we moved in across the street is because we wanted to live in a neighborhood filled with neighbors. We have one of the best block parties in the area, and we enjoy gathering people together. I enjoy having my kids being looked after by the neighbors across the street. And while we do not have laws on the books that prevent single owners from buying multiple adjacent properties, I feel like the practice diminishes the value of our neighborhoods. Because instead of having multiple families living on a street, which is why many of us moved to a place like Palo Alto, we have fewer neighbors. And I realize we cannot we cannot reject a development process because it happens to be owned by the people across the street. But in looking at the long-term effect of this, going back to SB 330, I disagree with Saul's argument that a 1-for-1 exchange is what's taking place here. What we're doing is we're taking an existing home where you live on the main floor and someone lived there and had a great existence. We know the home functions. I'm not aware of any safety issues that the occupant had in the time that they lived there. And in fact, since they left, the person who purchased the property and left it vacant for 3 years invested a substantial amount in fixing up and renovating the home. There were workers out there for months. So the home, not only is it not dangerous, it's been renovated in between the ownership of the current tenants. And if you look at that and you say, we are going to replace this, sorry, 48 seconds. We are going to replace this with a home where the front door goes into the garage. I don't know if we can bring back that visual. It's a garage entrance. The idea that a family is going to choose to buy this house and live in it when they have to live in the basement, there really is no main floor living. The front door is a garage door. To me, it makes it feel like an accessory unit to the next door property. And so what that in effect does is it takes what were 3 single family homes on the block and reduces it to 1. And well, I would be in favor of a development that didn't have any garage and had a house so that when the current owners sell it, a real family could move in. But with the current plan, what I see happening is these will be inexorably linked as a single virtual property that spans 2 APNs. And that is my concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. I think it was Martin.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other speakers, so we will bring it back. Oh, would the applicant like to speak to the members, the comments from the public? You have 3 minutes, Mr. Rhodes.
Good, thank you. I meant to mention at the beginning of the meeting, Simon and Shireen Tong, the owners, that were not able to come tonight. Their daughter has a school concert, the end of year concert, which they were not wanting to miss. So we've conferred and talked about this, and I'm hopefully able to speak on their points on their behalf and do a proper job. As far as the lot next door, 935, which became 2 lots, I believe that was 2012, if I'm recalling from what I've learned. That was before Simon and Shameen purchased it, so that was not any of their doing. As far as loss of housing units, I know there's been other changes over the time. I don't know that I see we're creating an unviable single-family home with our proposal. I think it's hard to imagine we're critiquing what somebody might do inside their property. I think any property someone could purchase and either live there or rent it or not do anything with it. My understanding is 935 beforehand, it was maybe one owner that lived there part of the time. It was mostly vacant for such a large house. Simon and Shameen are excited to live at 935. They have the opportunity to purchase 949 next door. They have a large family. They have family that come and stay. They're planning to use it to accommodate family. They want the opportunity to have a house next door when the kids grow up and want somewhere to come back to. They're not looking at this as anything but a nice home. If the concern is that we're just creating an accessory garage out of the building, it would be much easier just to remodel the existing structure into a garage. There'd be no variances we would need. There would be no design review, I suppose. It would just be an interior remodel. That would be a loss of housing. So certainly that's not the ideal approach. In this case, we are proposing something like I mentioned in our initial thing. We wanted a modern single-family home. We wanted to accommodate off-street parking. We wanted to expand the living area. We wanted to update it, make it up to current codes. It'll have fire sprinklers. It'll have fire-resistant construction. It's further away from the property lines, more energy efficient, and an improvement for hopefully for the neighborhood.
Good evening. May I speak? My name is Andrew Young. I'm an architect, and I can fill out a card afterwards with the office, or?
I'm afraid you have 3 minutes. You had 3 minutes.
Okay.
And they were used up.
Okay.
So thank you. Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission. So I don't see any lights on, but surely someone would like to go first. With questions? Okay. Then I will start out with a few observations. I certainly think this is a constrained property. Everyone would agree with that. And I appreciate that the front setback was retained to create a harmonious appearance on the street. I'm a little worried about the large tree that Commissioner Chang asked about. And maybe Mr. Sauls can clarify further whether it's a protected tree and be a little clearer if the Urban Forestry Department signed off on it, that it was okay. The basement, basically.
Yeah, so Urban Forestry did review this application. They were aware and reviewed the arborist report that is included on the plan set. So if you're looking at the plan set, it's page 7 out of 17. And they're talking about that tree number 4 is a Chinese elm tree. So it's not a redwood or a coast live oak tree. So it's not a protected tree in that sense. And the
You don't have that.
the summary on page 7 also identifies that, you know, the tree may be impacted, I think, kind of in the same manner that I was describing earlier before, that its root zones may be modified where it stretches or if it stretches within that kind of red ring image on the bottom right-hand side. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. I'm just zoomed into the plan set on page 7, which shows the arborist report.
Okay, I'm not sure that we got that in our plan set, but regardless, it's good to know it's not a a protected species, but it is protected by size, I believe. But we now know quite clearly that the urban forestry signed off on it, that it would be okay. So that's good to know. I am not seeing any lights still. So I guess, Commissioner Chang, go ahead. Oh, Commissioner Heckman, sorry.
Chair, I didn't want to cut you off if you want to continue with your remarks and then when you're done.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So I want to thank staff and the applicant for their presentations, and I'd like to thank the neighbor for elaborating on the correspondence he had submitted, which we did review. I'm supportive of moving forward the staff recommendation. One of the things I like about this design is that it takes a non-conforming structure and in at least 4 ways makes it more conforming. I think in one of those ways makes it conforming, period, rather than just less non-conforming. So I appreciate the attention to that and the success in that design. I also appreciate the modification of the house as this process went forward, starting with the 2-car garage, which we never saw that plan, but I would imagine, given its narrowness, would just present itself. That's all there's room for is a 2-car garage. That's what you'd see. This new design, presents itself as a little house with a 1-car garage that's wider than the entrance area. Beauty, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. I thought that I think it's Mr. Rose referred to the old house as charming. I agree with that. I think I would describe the new house as adorable, but you could flip those two. I like the old design. I like the new design. And in terms of how an owner wants to use property, that's really not our purview. I appreciate the concern, but it's really not our purview. The reality is, I think that if, given that this owner lives in the neighborhood and owns this property, however they use or don't use the new house, they could use or not use the existing house the same way. And so I do like the fact that this actually has more living area while appearing smaller. And I like the fact that it's safer, more efficient. And I feel like the tree issues have been addressed. So when we get to that point, I'll be ready to support or make a motion to move this forward to City Council.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang.
So I think we are not allowed to make decisions based on how somebody is going to use their property or not use it. They can build whatever they want on it as long as it's a residence. So it would not have been legal to simply build a 1-story garage and convert the entire property into a garage. That would have not passed muster with SB 330, but this does. However, it requires additional variances for the basement. And that's the part where the building does, the home does become more conforming in every way, except that it's now going to have a basement that encroaches into setbacks. And it didn't before. So I think that's where I wonder whether we are essentially allowing a special privilege. By doing so, we would be allowing a special privilege for that lot, that very small lot. So if I look at the language, it's not fully, it's not fully copied from the code. So if we look at the findings on packet page, I'm sorry, packet page 17. The language in the code actually says is a little bit more extensive. So the finding that we have to make is that the granting of the application shall not affect substantial compliance with the regulations or constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and in the same zoning district as the subject property. And so that's where I'm concerned, and I'm not sure that I can make the second finding because of the second piece that's required in the finding, because nobody else can build a basement in the setback. I understand that the first floor of the house is legal non-conforming and has been grandfathered in, but we're being asked to grant an additional variance for the basement. So that's, I don't have a problem with the other variances that we're being asked to grant, and that everything becomes more conforming. Thank you.
I'm not seeing lights from my car. Oh, Commissioner Templeton, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to wrap my head around what the problem is here. We have a really tiny lot with a really tiny structure that's really old. And the owners have an intention to continue providing housing and to modernize the structure. I mean, what else are we going to do with it as a city? Why would we prevent that? Because all that's going to happen if we don't make improvements is that the current building will become more dilapidated, less used, and as we heard, even the objectors want to make sure it's used. So I don't even really understand, even if it was even if it was an ADU, and if we're talking about something that's small along the size of an ADU, that still improves the size of the community and the activity in the area and makes the street more vibrant. So I'm struggling with objections about how the person's using the space and how they, what kind of structure they want. If the structure's already practically been approved and now it's coming back for another review, there's nothing that's glaringly obviously wrong with this proposal. There are people who are frustrated with it and frustrated with the direction the community is taking, and many other frustrations exist, but nothing that would motivate me to want to turn down this application. Thank you.
Commissioner Liu?
Just some brief comments. I agree largely with Commissioner Templeton. I personally dislike the aesthetics of the project, and I dislike the phenomenon of buying neighboring homes in cases where property is actually taken out of the market. However, I'm okay with the project overall. I think we should allow small lots to be well utilized. I realize the basement is a variance, but it is a variance that does not seem more onerous to the neighbors or a risk to the environment. And I personally support any neighbors who would request a similar variance on similarly small lots to have the basement or have otherwise better access or usability of their property. Because I would not nitpick otherwise on things that I maybe am otherwise not a fan of, like the aesthetics or parking situation, I will also vote to move forward with this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Chang. Then Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I thought that Vice Chair Chang asked a good and reasonable question about the language of variances. I work with them a lot, but I think this particular question is best fielded by Mr. Yang. Mr. Yang, the question I heard Vice Chair ask is, she's looking at the language of the, the state law and city variance finding about without the variance, you're deprived of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity. And so Vice Chair Chang said, well, other properties in the vicinity don't have basements that encroach. So how do we make this finding? Again, I kind of know the answer, but I think it's best if you would help the commission get some color on how these state law findings are meant to be interpreted.
Yeah, thanks. So in this case, the privileges that we're talking about are the kind of use and enjoyment of the property broadly. A variance is always seeking to go beyond the rules that are generally applicable to a property. So, building into the setbacks is why we have a variance process, to allow that to happen where most people aren't able to. And so we have these findings to make sure that we're only allowing these exceptions that most people aren't allowed to have in cases where there is something unique about the property. In this case, it's the very small size of the lot. And the privileges involved here are the ability to use this lot for a dwelling unit, which would not be possible with strict application of the development standards. And because I think staff's view on this particular application is that it does not grant a special privilege because it's really just allowing the property owner to use this property for a dwelling unit. A special privilege might be being able to have a business on the site where other residentially zoned properties are not able to do that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Yang. Mr. Heckman, did you have?
That's it.
Okay, so did you want to speak?
Yeah, I did. So I have a question for staff, because in general, my understanding is that with kind of legal non-conforming uses, that at least the spirit of the law, as I read it, is we allow people to remodel, to tear down and rebuild, but we're not supposed to increase the non-conformance, right? And in this case, it's a question to me. For example, there is a house right there right now that is apparently a livable house. So I understand it's old, but somebody could build a house there without a basement and not increase the non-conformance. So this one, it's a little bit of a trade, right? It's like, okay, we're going to add a parking space because it didn't have a parking space before, but in order to do that, we need to then have a basement, right? In order to maintain keep it livable. And so that's where I'm kind of wondering, like, what are we, it's decreasing the nonconformance in one dimension, but increasing in another. And in terms of in terms of relative to the current nonconformance, it kind of, becomes more nonconforming or less, or it's a wash. So I think that's where I'm struggling with it. I mean, I hear the neighbor's concern. I can't opine as to what the owner is going to do or not do with it. I do worry that it may be a little bit less livable in certain ways, but maybe more livable in others. But so I'm just trying to go with findings and how to look at that.
Yeah, so there are two separate concepts at play, I think. And the one you're bringing up is a legal non-conforming structure. And we have some rules that apply to legal non-conforming structures. And those situations pop up when something is built and then the rules change. And so now it's no longer complying with the rules. And in those cases, as you mentioned, we do say, you can make changes as long as you are reducing the amount of non-compliance. That's distinct from what's being requested here, which is a variance based on the unique properties of the lot.
And so this request, the variances that are requested, could come up even if the existing use was conforming, even if the existing structure was conforming. Someone could still come and say, I'd like a variance because I think this lot, you know, would not allow equal enjoyment with other properties if you strictly apply the development standards. So there's sort of two separate principles that you could look at here, but right now we're looking at the variance.
Yeah, okay, that's very helpful. So I think that in general, this is the challenge I see with this, not necessarily this one home. But with SB 9 coming and with smaller and smaller lots coming, we're going to run into the situation over and over and over again. And I mean, I'd rather solve it with something that just said that we're allowing basements into setbacks. You know, that it would be illegal if it were, if this property were attached to the adjacent property and then an ADU. So, but the fact that there's this larger issue where we're essentially saying, okay, basements can be built almost right up to your neighbor's yard and by setting this precedent, essentially, we'd be making that decision with, I don't know what ramifications. And so that doesn't excite me. Haven't fully decided here yet. But there's a way that this owner, because of their unique situation, could address the situation and make it 100% legal and we wouldn't have to ask for variances.
So, I agree with a lot of what I've heard tonight. It's not our job to judge the aesthetics or the use of the property. And I think I understand why the property owner would like to use this property to enhance their property next door. I looked into the maximum lot size in R2 and it is legal in that regard. My problem is that I don't quite understand why we would use variances to achieve this. And I don't think we have all the information that we needed. I would like to find a way to do this for this applicant, even though I know that not all the neighbors are happy about it, because I do think there's a legal way to achieve this. I'm uncomfortable using variances because in our code, we also say in 1B, any changes in the size of the shape of the subject property made by the property owner or his predecessor in interest while the property was subject to the same zoning designation, that is excluded. You cannot do that. And we didn't get, I don't know the history of this property, so I can't make that, I can't understand if there was, this owner was probably not the one that did it, but a previous owner, a predecessor who made this property small through subdivision at a time when it was zoned the same. So that information we don't have. We also don't have any information on how many sizes across, how many lots of this size across Palo Alto or in this locale there are where this might, I see your hand is up, so I'll get to you in a minute, Mr. Stalls. In this area or in this zone or this neighborhood of this size. And I worry that people will use this as a precedent. There's quite a lot of variances from the law, and obviously it can't be developed as 180 square foot anything. And I think probably another covered garage stall would be appreciated by the owner of the property, I don't know. But those are all irrelevant to me. But I do worry that we will be giving other property owners with less extremely small lots the idea that they can do the same thing. We generally disapprove, although it's not illegal, of combining lots in an effort to retain as many units across Palo Alto for individual tenants or families. So it's not, I don't know if it was discussed, but this could be achieved also by just making it one property, and they can either have 2 units with a garage on the property, or they could have a garage, another garage with an ADU. It seems better than setting the precedent. They would get exactly the same thing, but a precedent would not be set for a variance that I kind of agree with, that I have few problems kind of making. I do believe it is a special privilege that other properties in the area would not have available to them. So it is the precedent, not the actual. If there's another way to achieve this, I would be more likely to want to do it that way than with a variance. I think variances should be used very carefully because they are special privileges pretty much. And sometimes they are really, really important for the use of the property. But I don't know if staff and the applicant considered that route. But Mr. Sauls, you had your hand up earlier. So
Yeah, so we do have information regarding how many relevant parcels there are in the city that would be affected by some sort of decision like this. So I first started looking at a higher size threshold to kind of try to capture maybe a little bit more information. So I queried our GIS database, which has our mapping software of all the parcels in the city, about lot sizes or parcels that are zoned for residential, and also parcels that are about 2,000 square feet in size. And in total, that came back to me with about 60 parcels. And going through each individual parcel to understand its specific zone district and the specific uses that already existed on the site, 46 of them were either commercial properties, they were either easements, Santa Clara Valley Water District easements, utility easements, or they were undevelopable parcels because they were public facility parcels, or because they were slivers or shavings of parcels attached onto larger parcels already. 14 of those then were parcels that were up to 2,000 square feet. And from there, I then filtered it down further to understand how many parcels were actually 2,000 and 1,500 square feet. And from the 14, there were actually only 2 parcels that had a 1,500 square foot size or lesser that were developed as a single family home and could otherwise be replaced in this manner. So there is a very, very, very insignificant number of parcels within the city that this would be affecting in general.
okay, thank you for that information. Do you have any information about 1B, which is the property owner or predecessors in interest having made this change?
So I think the question is basically around the adjacent parcels, 935 and 943. Those 2 parcels were merged together, which is those 2 parcels themselves are now 1 parcel, but it's a separate parcel entirely from this one. And so I think, as was mentioned before, these property owners themselves did not go through the subdivision process or the lot merger process to establish the larger parcel adjacent to it, the 935 and 943 Scott Street. This parcel itself was, I'm not off the top of my head entirely sure when it was created. I have seen a number of parcels in the city that are these smaller lots that are or have been in the past carriage house lots. But I believe Ms. French might have some additional information on that.
Ms. French?
Sure. I was just scanning our system here to see if I could locate one of the older parcel maps, subdivisions. So I did find one dating back to, excuse me while I move it, 2001. There was a survey done. It's showing this tiny lot that existed at that time. So certainly, before 2001, this parcel existed in its current state. I haven't gone any farther back than that.
Okay, so it seems like that might not be knowable at this time. Was there any discussion of achieving this for the applicant without using variances by simply merging the lots?
We didn't have a discussion about merging this parcel to the adjacent parcel, the 935 and 943 parcel.
Okay. Commissioner Heckman?
Chair, are you done with your questions? I'm going to wait till you're finished.
Okay. Okay, so it's not my business to, I guess, ask the applicant to pursue that other route. It would be preferable to me rather than giving out variances, because I'm actually worried that this might create an interest in small lots, but not as small as the ones that Mr. Sauls looked at, asking for the same kind of encroachments. But I guess that's the thing about the variance. It's specific to each project, and that members of the public should not expect in a different circumstance that they would get the same sort of deal. So I think that given that, and I think, well, I'm still thinking a little, but I want to go to Commissioner Heckman.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, any other comments before? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Heck.
That's all right. So I think the chair precedent is sometimes a concern in neighborhoods among the public. But I think the chair actually expressed it really well, that this variance is a unique process, and it is 100% site specific. So that's why, for example, in our findings, it doesn't talk about other properties that have gotten variances, because there are other properties that may not be this small that have gotten variances. That's really not relevant. The question is there something about this property that makes development of a home of realistic size impossible? And of course, here you could have a 180 square foot home. I guess it could be 2 levels, so 360 square feet, but you got a stairway in there. And so that's not a reasonable home. So I've got, on this particular one, I've got no concern for precedent. And I appreciate staff anticipating some of our questions tonight, and having done that research. I think that was really useful for us and for the public to hear that there's really only 2 other parcels in what might be a similar situation and may someday come to us for development. I do think it's interesting that in the staff report and comments tonight, despite the fact that we've had these rules for decades, there was no precedent that anybody was leaning on to get this set of variances tonight. And I won't be surprised if no one in the future ever tries to waive this approval as a basis to grant their variance on a different piece of property. So with that, I will move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you for your second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Would you like to speak to your second?
No, thank you.
Okay. Before we vote, I would like to say that I'm very sympathetic to the neighbors who have concerns about this project, but I do not think we have a legal way really to say no to it. And I hope that it's a lovely part of Palo Alto, a lovely street, and I hope that when the construction is done, everybody is super happy with the outcome. And with that, Ms. Dow, would you conduct the vote?
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Chair Suma,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our staff and the members of the public that came out this evening. And I think we'll take a 7-minute break. And then we'll be back with Commissioner Aiken. on item number 3, which is recommendation on an ordinance amending Palo Alto Municipal Code Title 18, 18.14, 1876, 1877, and this is to implement Housing Element Program 1.3. Okay, I think we will go straight to the staff.
And I'd like to introduce to the Planning and Transportation Commission, our newest staff member, Coleman Frick, who jumped right in and
Welcome.
worked on this report.
Thank you, Ms. French. Good evening, commissioners. So this item is implementation of a housing element program that's specific to by right zoning approvals. Next, please. The purpose of the action by the commission this evening is to recommend approval based on attachment A, which is the ordinance to develop the process for these by right approvals. And the deadline for adopting these regulations is January 31st of next year. Next. So just a brief background of kind of how this fits into the larger housing element process. The housing element was adopted this past May, including this program and the timelines that are outlined for implementation of the programs therein. The California Department of Housing and Community Development requires additional revisions to the housing element, and the readoption is anticipated for early next year. In total, there's 122 housing element implementation programs, and the commission and council recently saw some related to programs 1.1, which also had the same requirement date. But this particular program was inadvertently not included with those other amendments, and that's why we're bringing it on this accelerated timeline. So the program relates to recycled housing element sites that were used in past cycles, and I'll get into that in the next slide, and by right approval specifically. And state law defines that as a discretionary approval, like a conditional use permit that has the local authority kind of making a decision. And it also outlines that it can't constitute a project under CEQA, but it doesn't prohibit the use of design review for these projects. Next. So just some key points I wanted to hit about this program in the housing element. It applies specifically to lower income designated housing opportunity sites that again were reused from past cycles. There's a distinction whether they were vacant sites or non-vacant sites. And the adopted housing element specifies 16 total sites that would be impacted. One key additional requirement of a few that are outlined in the staff report I wanted to touch on is the 20% affordable requirement. And so any proposed development would have to meet all the eligibility criteria, including that, to use this process. Next slide. So just briefly, the ordinance to develop this new process requires amendments to these 3 chapters. And through that, it would create this new ministerial review process for these eligible by right projects. Next. So briefly, the standard process for multifamily review that's outlined in the code is that it would be an ARB recommendation, and that can include multiple meetings and then a director level decision. And there's also the newer streamline review process, which allows projects that meet objective criteria to go through a more streamlined process with 1 ARB study session. And next, the by right process is kind of modeled after that. So it would be a staff level review to determine eligibility, and the project would have to comply with all objective standards, including those in the comp plan, specific plans and area plans as applicable. as well as the objective standards in the code. And then the director could refer the development for one study session with the ARB. And crucially, again, there wouldn't be CEQA review required. So this would kind of be a similar process to what I understand 525 East Charleston went through as part of the AB 2162 process. And again, it can't be a project under CEQA. So the timeline for this, just because we have to meet that deadline, staff is planning to take, based on the recommendation this evening, the permanent ordinance concurrent with an urgency ordinance, and that would be considered by the council on the 22nd. And then that way the permanent ordinance would go into effect before the expiration of the urgency ordinance. Next. So with that, staff's recommended motion is to review and recommend city council adoption of the draft ordinance to implement housing element program 1.3, creating by right zoning approval for specific housing element inventory sites and making conforming changes to Title 18. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frick. I am wondering, oh, I see a light already. Commissioner Aiken?
Hi, are you taking clarifying questions at this point?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Frick. I'm referring to packet page 55, 18.14.050. First is a clarification. We talk about uses in prior housing elements, and I'm curious as to what the definition of prior is there. For instance, the immediately prior, the immediately to prior, or any prior in the entire history of the RENA process?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So my understanding is it's the immediately prior, and then that's for the non-vacant, and then for vacant, it's the two prior.
Okay, so the most recent then that apply in each of the two cases.
Correct.
Okay. And second, later on in that same section, we talk about affordable to lower income households. After a quick search, I found 3 separate inconsistent definitions of lower income in the code. So which definition are we applying here?
So for the purposes of this, my understanding is that it's any site that's designated as one of the lower income like opportunity sites within our housing element inventory. So within the inventory, we have, sites that are designated as different income levels. And so when, we look at eligibility for this, it would be opportunity sites that were designated in the 5th cycle, which is the last cycle, and the current cycle as one of those lower income opportunity sites.
Okay, so specifically, this is the, say, the HCD definition of lower income as 80% of AMI. It's whatever is lower income as defined by the housing element in the opportunity sites inventory.
The opportunity sites are based on kind of that state criteria for, what would be considered different income thresholds. And some of that is just based on density, as well as other factors.
Yeah, there's some complexity there. I noticed in, I think it's 16.65.020, that there's actually a 60% limit for lower income, and that will probably apply in some other cases that we have to consider in the future. So I just wanted to get clear about when we tell people we're providing lower income housing, exactly what are we providing?
So in this case, it would be the 80% threshold.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. All right, good. Thank you. That's everything.
Commissioner, Mr. Yang, did you want to add something?
Oh, no.
No, okay, thank you for that. Commissioner Chang?
Before you depart, Mr. Yang, I have a question for you following up on that. Okay, so again, there's the lower income that is referred to twice on packet page 55. So it's both that the site was originally designated to accommodate 80% or lower, as well as the point about 20% of the units must be affordable to lower income is also referring to the 80% AMI. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so then none of the, so if it were a opportunity site for moderate income, then it would not, like the 80 to 120 range, it would never be in this bucket of by right sites. Okay.
I don't believe so, but I do need to double check that the usage of lower income in the housing element law.
Okay, yeah, we better make sure that it's correct in our ordinance, or clarified in our ordinance if it needs to be. My question was about, let's see, packet page. Okay, so my question is about when a site falls into this bucket. So we are allowed to reuse opportunity sites, but my understanding is that we're only allowed to reuse them if they are upzoned. Is that correct? And then if, say, we were reusing something, would it still, I'm wondering at how the interaction of a reused site and these by right approval sites, like what's the interaction there? That's basically my question.
Right. So basically, the state passed a law that expressed skepticism about reused sites, with the idea that if you had designated this as a place where housing was likely going to develop in your previous housing elements, and then it didn't do so, there are going to be limits on our ability to use those sites again. And one of those limits is if we are saying that we're going to reuse this site and we think it's suitable for lower income housing development, then we have to rezone it to allow at least 30 units per acre, 16 units per site, and to have a minimum density of 20 units per acre. And so that's kind of one aspect of reusing sites. If you're going to reuse a site and say it's suitable for lower income, you have to zone it to a particular standard. And then the second element is the by right approval. If someone comes in with a qualifying project on one of those sites, you have to approve it.
So this doesn't affect my recommendation to council, but I'm just trying to understand what we're saying here. So in a hypothetical example, let's say that we had a site that was for very low income, or designated as a very low income site in our, designated as a site for very low income housing in our housing element, and it was RM20. And then nothing was built there. So then the next time, like let's say the 8th cycle housing element, we say, okay, we're going to reuse that site and we're going to upzone it to RM40 now. But if somebody comes along wanting to use that site, we have to approve it by right, as long as there's 20% AMI. So doesn't this in effect potentially, we won't get as much low income housing as we might have hoped for if they could. So basically the site doesn't need to be used for low income housing other than 20% of it. Is that correct?
That's right. But I guess one thing to clarify, when we talk about having sites that are designated for lower income housing, that doesn't mean that it's entirely lower income housing. It's usually, some percentage might be 10, 15, or 20% lower income housing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
just because
we'd be getting what we expect.
Okay, but in effect though, any site that was reused, or not reused, but in a prior housing element and not developed, whether it's in the current housing element or not, it could be subject to this, as long as all the other requirements are met?
No, it needs to be in our current housing element inventory list. And
Oh, so it
to be-
needs to be on the house at the opportunity sites list.
That's right.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I was very confused about that. Thank you.
Great questions, Commissioner Chang. I am not seeing any other lights. My questions have been answered. Do I have any other comments or questions? Yes, we will go to the public. I haven't seen anybody, but Ms. Dowser, anyone?
No, I have no request to speak.
Okay, yeah, so seeing that we have no public speakers, Commissioner Heckman would like to speak.
Thank you. Couple of questions for staff about the 16 sites that this is are potentially by right. Did staff happen to have available, I'm kind of curious, sort of where those are distributed across the city. Does staff happen to have a map that might show that? I didn't ask for it in advance, so you might not.
Yeah, we have a map that we can provide of the sites that would be subject to this from the adopted housing element.
Is that something you could
Yeah.
pull up and we can look at?
Just give me a moment and
Sure.
I can share my screen.
Oh, yeah, he's pulling up a diagram because I have more.
Okay.
I have questions about these 16 sites.
Okay, does
So-
anyone else have questions while we're waiting?
Oh, there we go.
Nope, so we'll just be patient.
No, the wait is over.
Okay,
There it is.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
That
was
is
fast.
interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Frick.
Sorry, it took a second, but hopefully that's.
Okay. So if I'm seeing this right, it looks like they're all clustered along the spine of El Camino. Is that?
Primarily,
what
yeah.
I'm seeing?
There's some that are.
Oh, there's a
Yeah.
cluster. Yeah, cluster Middlefield, San Antonio. I see it. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Next question about these 16. Did staff, I'm curious about the potential range of residential units for these 16. Has staff, I didn't see it in the staff report, has the staff looked at, if all 16 were developed in the next cycle, based on their minimum range, we'd get at least these many units, and the maximum no more than that number. Did staff happen to look at that and have numbers?
We do have those numbers and it's available in our spreadsheet, but we would need a moment to tally that up. for you.
Okay, so maybe as the discussion progresses.
Okay.
So those are kind of the clarifying questions. I've got a couple of suggestions for the ordinance, but I'll maybe hold those until other commissioners have a chance to weigh in.
You can, seeing no lights, I don't see why you can't go ahead.
Okay, great. Then this is perhaps mostly a dialogue for Mr. Yang, but packet page 55, the bottom third of the page, 18.14050. So my reading of subpart A, I think that all of requirements 1 through 4 need to be met. Right, subject to the following requirements. These aren't either or, but rather all of. Do I have
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Okay, so you might want to consider in the preface in subpart A, subject to each of the following requirements. And then after number 3, instead of a period, I think you need another semicolon with the word and to lead you to 4, to just make, again, clear in the ordinance that you have to satisfy all 4 of these. So that's just one suggestion. I do think the question, perhaps it was Commissioner Aiken, whoever it asked, is one prior housing element mean the most recent or any? That could also be a source of confusion. I don't know if this was drawn directly from the state statute. If so, then I wouldn't monkey with that language. But if we have paraphrased, that might be a clarification you want to look at. Is this our sixth cycle that we've just started?
Yes.
Right. So then the question, for example, a non-vacant site included in one prior housing element, could that be any of the last 5? Or is it only the 5th? So it's just something for staff to look at. And then the other.
Sorry, just to expand on Mr. Frick's answer on that. The state law is not entirely clear.
Okay.
So our best understanding is that it's the immediately prior, but there's not a definitive answer on that.
Okay, then I think you've probably used language close to state law, and I think that's the safest course. So however that is interpreted, and that interpretation, of course, could change, our language would track. So, okay, so I think we leave that alone. Over on package page 57, the ministerial and by right review process. So this really is about subparts B and C. So the planning director is going to make a decision as a part of, that's the planning approval as a part of this ministerial process, right?
Right.
Okay. And I suspect that depending on the process, there could be different timeframes. And so that's why we have this sentence at the end of B. Decision on the application has to be made within any timeframes dictated by applicable state law. So that gives us, that says we got to meet state law clock, but it's flexible enough that if state law clock changes, we don't have to change our ordinance. Do I have that part right?
Yes, and also different application types have different processing timelines.
Right. Okay. So in subpart C, the director has the ability to refer this to ARB for an informal review. And I suspect that, and then, E is, D is a notice of that. I'm wondering if it's worth making clear that this optional process for the planning director it doesn't extend the time, because I don't believe it does. I think it has to be within whatever the timeframes are, the director can fold it in. So I'm going to suggest staff consider whether it wants to clarify that having the public study session doesn't extend the time, so people who might not like whatever the project is don't think this is a way to slow the train. So just something for staff to consider going forward. So those were my comments, and I'm supportive of staff's recommendation on this item. Thanks.
Commissioner Liu?
Thank you. Just a couple of high-level questions. Can staff explain the intuition for the different requirements for vacant versus non-vacant sites for either one or either 2 or 1 prior housing element? Like, is there, what's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so kind of following up on what Mr. Yang was saying, it's sort of like the state skepticism, right? Of like, if you keep reusing these sites, are they viable opportunity sites? And so the vacant, like a non-vacant site, it's only 1 prior, because it's seen as like, it's kind of more difficult to change a use to redevelop it, is kind of my understanding. But that's kind of my best guess based on that.
Right. That was my intuition too, but I would think that if it were harder to develop, then it would be more lax. So it would be 2 prior for the non-vacant, but 1 prior for the vacant. But the logic is the other way around, and it doesn't match my intuition, but I guess there can be a lot of different cases and different intuitions. Yeah.
Sometimes there's, HCD has kind of concern with, let's say it's like a strip mall site that's a housing element site and it has multiple tenants. they want more information about like, oh, how would this turn over and redevelop as, you know, under a single project? And I think that's kind of sometimes the skepticism if it's like a non-vacant site.
My second high-level question was just really what options we actually have for the actual ordinance for the by right approval process. It seems like just the nuts and bolts of the ministerial process are what they are based on state law is the only option that we can really advise on, the optional referral to ARB, or are there other things that we considered for the ordinance that aren't here, or other things that we could consider for this process?
Yeah, there's really not a lot to discuss in my opinion. The state law is pretty directive on this. I think the issue you pointed out, whether or not to have an optional referral to the ARB, you know, that's something that's just, you know, part of what we as staff chose, and, you know, PTC could advise on that. But state law has pretty much charted our course here.
Yeah, got it. So the ARB thing is the only thing that's not dictated in state law, and so the only thing we could like possibly change here, but otherwise it's, yeah, pretty straightforward. Thank you.
So there's not, given our lack of opportunity to make any changes here, I don't have much to say. Some of my questions have been answered. I agree with my colleague that the non-vacant and vacant priors is really counterintuitive, but I find a lot of what the state has done to be counterintuitive, so it didn't surprise me. And as to the referral to the ARB, I'm very much in favor of keeping the ARB involved, in as much as I think that we have a great ARB, and that applicants could, even if they don't have to take their suggestions, I think they can really benefit from their suggestions. And other than that, my other questions have been posed and answered. I don't see any other lights, so I guess we are ready for a motion. We can take your public comment. I think it is the one that doesn't work.
I just wasn't thinking about it when you asked before.
We can take public comment from you, but you need to speak into the microphone, please.
Okay. Yes, my name is Eugen Lockhart, and I don't understand the core context of what you guys are discussing from the original presentation, but I'd just like to give a little bit of personal comment about the state laws and the development pressures that you are receiving. I understand that the state wants all cities to grow at a standard rate, and it makes sense in some regards, but it was kind of inflicted upon you guys, and I know you're all feeling that pinch too. A big thing though is it's really forcing people to rush development, and based on the presentation before this current topic, it's community spirit, and I think that's a lot of what Palo Alto was about, is community spirit. Renting single family dwellings, whether it's a rental or owned by an individual, it still provides a certain level of community spirit versus high-rise apartments where you get very transient spirit within the tenants. So I'm not necessarily a proponent of these large developments. I'm here for the next presentation where we're discussing large developments, and it's directly affecting myself and my neighborhood. I am a landlord as well as a resident of Palo Alto. But a big thing I would like to encourage or note first is our economy is in flux. California put a lot of pressure on everybody to grow rapidly, but those are pre-COVID numbers. And since then, the work from home mentality has come into vogue and then went out of vogue, and it's going back into vogue as everybody realized that they do want to work from home, and their homes are not all in Palo Alto anymore either, in our context. As a landlord, I understand that it's getting hard to find tenants because there's actually not many people here, but we're still forced to grow. So as we are obliged to grow with these high-rise apartments to accommodate more people, different economic values, we do still have to understand that many of our talent here is getting paid astronomical prices, and we are trying to appreciate that they all want to go and have restaurant food, and we do need workers. So I understand the balance, but what we can do is really encourage any development to have a touch with community, more communal access. And as far as transportation is going, making it work well for both the cars and the bikes and the pedestrians. I say both, it's all three. In that a lot of our traffic lights are so restrictive that everybody's diving through the neighborhoods and blazing through the neighborhoods in the cars, which destroys the community neighborhood within the neighborhood if you can't walk across the street without getting angry at the car that just blew the stop sign. So I'm talking about a lot of hodgepodge of ideas here, but seriously, we need to, if we're going to approve large developments, at least encourage the community aspect and how it interacts with the remaining neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood, and the closest downtown areas that they have. So those are my thoughts. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Coming back to the commission, I'm looking for a motion and a seconder. Commissioner Heckman?
I will. Yeah, I will move the staff recommendation with staff as this moves forward to consider the minor changes to the language of the ordinance described by various commissioners during this hearing.
Second.
Would you like to speak to your first?
No, thank you.
Would you like to speak to your second?
No, thanks.
All righty then. Ms. Dow, if you could conduct the vote, please.
Commissioner Templeton,
Yes.
Chair Suma,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much for that. And I think we will dive right into item number 4, which is quasi judicial hearing 420 Acacia, recommendation on the applicant's request for approval of vesting tentative map to allow for a condominium subdivision, et cetera. And I think that we should go first to staff for the staff report on this item.
Yes, thank you. We have Claire Raybold remotely presenting this evening. Take it away, Claire.
Good evening, commissioners.
Hold on a second. I forgot to ask for disclosure. So very quickly, does anybody have anything to disclose?
No.
No.
No. No.
I probably should have consulted with Mr. Yang beforehand, but I live about 1,000 feet away from the property line. I believe I should be able to proceed probably under the same logic that I was able to proceed on the Fry site, but we'll disclose that I live adjacent to the property.
Thank you.
And I'll just say staff looked at that issue and did not find any reason for a conflict.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yes.
No disclosure for me.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Rabo, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, planning commissioners. Project before you today is a vesting tentative map for 420 Acacia Avenue. The project includes a vesting tentative map for a single lot subdivision of an existing 35,573 square foot parcel. for a 16-lot condominium subdivision. So it's one lot, but you're creating 16 air units essentially on that parcel. And it requires a waiver under state density bonus law from the private street width, which was also required and approved as part of the Streamlined Housing Development Project review, which was recently approved by the Director of Planning. So the existing parcel is code compliant. It meets the minimum lot size of 8,500 square feet, and it meets the minimum width of 70 feet and minimum depth of 100 feet. So it's a compliant lot, and they're not changing the parcel itself. Condominium subdivision requires private streets per Title 21 requirements. And so the private street that's being proposed is a 22-foot streets where the minimum street width is 32 feet. So key considerations are really just the findings, the reverse findings for subdivision map findings as outlined in the draft record of land use action in your packet under attachment B. And then consideration of the waiver, but I suppose with the understanding that the development itself has already been reviewed and approved, and that waiver has been approved for the development. But technically it's a request for under both the map and the development itself. And I just want to also note that the project was found to be exempt from CEQA in accordance with CEQA guidelines sections 15.332, which is a class 32 exemption for infill development. And that exemption covers the whole of the action, which includes both the proposed development and the map. So with that, I'm going to just say that staff recommends that the Planning and Transportation Commission take the following action. Recommend approval of the proposed vesting tentative map to the City Council based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval as outlined in attachment B of your packet. And with that, I'll turn it back to you. The applicant is here tonight, Dividend Housing, as well as the architect. And they're happy to answer any questions for you. I'm not sure, I don't believe they have a presentation, but I don't know if they would like to speak, so you can ask that of them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rabo. Would the applicant like to take this opportunity to speak? You would have 3 minutes.
Sure, I'm happy to introduce myself.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Sure, my name is Josh Frotzis. I'm here on behalf of Acacia Comuna Investors in Dividend Homes, and with me tonight is Rita Raj and Ron from the Dawn Architecture Group. And really, I just want to thank staff and Claire for their efforts. This is, I guess, by way of history, Dividend's been a private home builder for about 40 years in the Core Bay area. And this will be our first project in Palo Alto, and we just couldn't be more excited to be here. And the process of working through entitlements with Claire and the other members of staff has just been absolutely fantastic. We look forward and hope for your approval tonight, and we can't wait to build some homes in the spring. So we're happy to answer any questions you might have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vrotos, if I got that correct.
Pretty close, yeah.
Good. Thank you. So do commissioners have any clarifying questions? If not, we can go to the public. I see that Commissioner Aiken does.
Thank you, Chair. This concerns the conditions of approval, and give me a moment to set up this question properly. So packet page 60, under property information, there's a notation that we're located within a plume, and there is discussion below. Now, check the map, and yes, this is in the California Olive Emerson Plume area. I cannot find any discussion in our staff report. However, I was referred to the staff report for the ARB meeting, which not only does have some discussion on this subject, it actually has a recommended condition of approval regarding the plume. And that recommended condition of approval doesn't appear in our proposed conditions of approval. So the question I have is, what happened to it?
Yeah, it's a condition of approval of the development itself, because it relates to the physical improvements of the site. I didn't make it a condition of approval of the vesting tentative map component, since it's really not including any earthwork or anything related to that. I suppose it could be if we want it, if it was really important to make it, but it is a condition of approval of the development.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure that if it were important, that it wasn't lost.
Yeah, thank you. Good point.
And perhaps the reference to discussion below, not only for this, but also for protected and heritage trees, needed an update.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Chang?
I just had a question about the 2 out of 16 units being provided below market rate. Doesn't Palo Alto require 15%? 2 is 12.5%. So then I'm wondering what happened to the other 2.5%. Is it just paid into a fund?
It's paid in lieu. Yeah. Whenever it becomes a fractional of unit, if it's less than a half of a fractional unit left, then you can do pay in lieu for those, the remainder.
Okay, thanks. And if it's more than half, then we have to round up. Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. And then I did have a question about the protected trees. See discussion below on page. It says see discussion below on page 60, but I don't. It's the same issue, right? There's no discussion. Is that correct?
I apologize. I think I meant to pull that out of the ARB staff report, but I'm happy to speak generally to it. So there are a number of protected trees on the site in that they're over 15 inches in diameter, breast height. Mainly that, it was a parking lot, and along the rear of the property, there are a number of trees that have to be removed. And those are mainly being removed because the whole rear of the site is really a lot of the C3 stormwater, municipal stormwater area, bioretention area. And so it conflicts with, with that bioretention area. And so they are replacing, I'm trying to remember the number of trees being removed and the number of trees being replaced. It is roughly equivalent number being removed and replaced. But to meet our tree canopy requirement, they have to pay in lieu fees for the remainder for that canopy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I am not seeing any other lights. Do I have any other questions? I was also very concerned about the trees on site. So I don't really know that that's part of the vesting, the map issue. But I hope that we are going to see a sufficient number of trees on this site and not, and that we won't see removal of protected trees that should have been saved. But that's just kind of a comment. It's a project that's already been approved. So I think we should go to the members of the public. If we have any speakers, and I believe we have one in the room at least.
Yes, one from Eugen Lockhart.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name's Eugen Lockhart, and I represent the properties on the other side of the fence of this project. So we're local to it. We've met with actually Josh, and we appreciate this project in that they're actually homeowner residential type projects, which I've spoke with you guys before about it. It actually does build a sense of community. So we actually generally appreciate and approve of the project. I mostly came here just to make sure there weren't any major changes along the way. And I did appreciate seeing the drainage on the drawings up at the table, which was a huge concern of ours. And that directly relates to one of your comments about the trees that are on a little levee there. But they do need to rework that entire area to get the drainage proper. All of our properties are downsloping because this used to be a railroad track easement. So everything was sloping into the drainage ditch of the rail lines. And that's why it does have a certain situation that we appreciate they are addressing. So that's really all I needed to say. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sticking with us this evening. And I am not seeing any other lights, so I think, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Chang.
I have a question, just out of curiosity. For the 2 units that are below market rate, what affordability level are they at?
They are required to be provided at, let me try and remember.
Well, according to
they're in
bonus.
it's in the moderate. It's moderate level, but so 80 to 120. But I think we put in the requirement that one was slightly lower. So I want to say that they were either 120 or 110.
I thought that for density bonus, one of them needed to be 80 and the other one was, oh no, 180 to 100 and the other 100 to 120. At least something I read when I was doing research on this earlier today.
It all depends on what you are trying to, you can get additional concessions if you're doing to lower levels of income levels.
Yes.
So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve, I guess. Yeah.
And then again, kind of I think this is the second project that we've heard that has used density bonus. With respect to the waivers, so, I mean, I know there's the 22-foot street width, which is not ideal, but it is a waiver. So we essentially this is not so much as relating to this project in particular, but as I was reading this, I had a question about how, like, if an applicant asks for a waiver, do we pretty much grant that waiver, or what's the process?
Sorry, Albert, you're welcome to.
So, waivers have to relate to like the physical dimensions of the project. If there is a development standard that physically precludes the project from being built, we do have to waive it, yes.
Okay. And since I saw that this was reviewed, the street width was reviewed by Traffic and Fire and for safety, I'm supportive of the map.
Commissioner Hackman.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I want to say that I'm excited to have Dividend Homes coming to Palo Alto. I've never worked for them, but I've worked across the table from Dividend and their principal, Dick Oliver, down in Morgan Hill on a number of projects where my client got the entitlements and then sold to Dividend, which subsequently built beautiful homes. And I can tell you there are lots and lots of people in Morgan Hill who love their Dividend homes. They do really high quality work, and I don't know what took them so long to come to Palo Alto, although I kind of do. But I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad and I hope this is not the last project because I think as our speaker mentioned, they are, part of their ethos is community and architecture that feeds toward community. So I'm really happy to have another good home builder come to Palo Alto. Kind of a technical question. So going condo, set of CC&Rs, is State Department of Real Estate approval required? And if so, does that need to be a condition of approval, or it doesn't need to be a condition of approval because it's going to happen under state law?
Probably
for Mr. Yang.
Yeah.
I'll save you, Clerk.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't understand the question.
Well, so usually in Davis Sterling Act, my understanding is they, in addition to maybe having a set of CC&Rs that satisfies the local requirement, they get approval from, it's the DRE approval, State Department of Real Estate. And so I suspect that they'll do that here. My only question was, is that something we need in our conditions of approval for the map that they, prior to map approval, they will obtain DRE approval?
No, it's actually not something that we can require, right? We are approving a map for condominium purposes, but ultimately the decision to go to the state to seek that condominium plan approval isn't up to us.
Okay, all right. Then just sort of to understand why we're here tonight. So they have a project that has been approved. They're coming for a condo map tonight. And it wasn't really clear to me in the staff report why. Was that sort of always the plan, and they just kind of broken this into two pieces to go through the streamlining process and then sort of complete the project by going condo, or was it originally planned to be a rental and they've decided to change the market? So I'm just trying to understand, in this is the first one we've had sort of broken up like this. Why we're doing a map, or are there alternatives that they were looking at, like doing a series of parcel maps for townhouses and selling them off that way?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So they were never intended to be rental. They've always been intended to be ownership since they've submitted. But if you're doing a vesting tentative map, you're required to have all the entitlements complete before you make a decision. Now, we have allowed projects to move forward concurrently and do a concurrent review where council makes a decision on the entitlements before the vesting tentative map. And the director has the authority to have everything go together should he choose to. But he's not required to. And unless there's some sort of reason why there's a benefit in doing that, if there's a reason why we think the project is going to be, it really comes down to the applicant's decision to, like, we're not necessarily going to force them to do everything concurrently unless they think there's like a streamlined benefit in doing that, because you can avoid then you're not getting an appeal, you're going directly to council for everything, and council's making an ultimate decision on everything. Or if there's an environmental impact report where we have to make findings of overriding consideration, that's another reason why we would just take everything to council together. So in this case, they're very interested.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. They're interested and they're already, going to be pursuing the building permits now that the architectural review entitlement is complete. And so we'll be moving forward with that under a concurrent review process pending council decision on the vesting tentative map.
Okay, so it sounds like the plan was always that this would be a condominium project, and just the process was utilized, basically, it seems like, to be able to move through the process as quickly as possible. So you start with the streamline approval, and then you follow it up with the condo map for a project that is already subject to streamline approval, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. I am supportive of the staff recommendation here.
Okay, now I'm not seeing any other lights. I too am supportive of the staff recommendation. So thank you to our staff and for the applicant and members of public for coming tonight. And I will be looking for a motion in a second.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Excellent. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, would you like to speak to your second?
The project is already approved, and so we need to do this.
Okay. All right, Ms. Dow, would you conduct a vote, please?
Chair Suma,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so that's our last scheduled item, except for commissioner comments or questions. If anybody has any comments. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Templeton.
Happy holidays.
Okay, I don't see any other lights, but I will take an opportunity before I adjourn the meeting to thank staff and my colleagues for a very productive year. I thought we worked together really well. And I will say, I served on this body for a long time before I had an opportunity to be chair. And there's good and bad with that, because I'm happy that I got to be chair of this group, this precise group, because it has been extremely pleasant to work with all of you and to get to know you. And I know, but I was going to add that you stepped on my joke. But you have to put up with me for 4 more months. But this is the end of the year, so it's a good time to mark such important things. And then also, as was mentioned earlier by Commissioner Heckman, Commissioner Reckdahl could not be with us this evening because his mother passed away. So finally, I would like to adjourn this meeting in memory of Joan Marie Reckdahl. And if you look her obituary up, she sounded like a pretty amazing woman. So we are thinking of you, Commissioner Reckdahl, and your family at this time. So thank you all, and meeting adjourned.